Hey there, Titans, and welcome back to another Titan Academy video. Today, we'll be providing an overview on multi-step containers in Titan Web. We'll be discussing what multi-step containers are, when you use them to your multi-step containers. We'll then discuss the difference between your containers and why you would use which kind of containers, and then we'll focus on a couple of key differences unique to some of these containers. Let's get started. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is add your multi-step containers to your project. You'll head over to your pink plus button and click on the Containers tab and scroll down and you'll see tabs, accordions, steppers, and multi-step containers. So what is the purpose of these containers? The idea here is that if you want your end user to be able to interact with data that's part of a process or essentially jump between different steps or stages or pages in a process, you can use any of these multi-step containers and have different content for each section or for each step on your container. So for instance, if I have some sort of form that I want, and this is important to note that even though we are using multi-step containers here, we should still be using elements such as form elements and autofit containers in order to put elements within these multi-step containers. So imagine I have some sort of form here on step 1 and that in here. And on step 2, maybe I have a, let's say, a file viewer. And on my third step, maybe some kind of interactive document. Okay, so I can have on each tab a completely different set of elements that I'm displaying to my end user. And that's essentially the main point of these, is to make your end user feel like they are jumping through pages or steps in a process without actually using pages in Titan Web. Now, in order to add more steps to the containers, and they all work the same way, you'll always have static values for your steps or your tabs. And you can click on Edit Mapping and add values or remove values. And you can also do dynamic values and bring your steps or your tabs or whatever it might be from Salesforce. So you can dynamically bring in here maybe stages of an opportunity or really anything that you'd like to dynamically come from Salesforce in order to represent the different steps of this process. The next thing that you can also keep in mind is each of these steps has a specific value. With this value, I can trigger conditions based on the current step that I'm on. I can have a user be sent to a specific step in the process based on conditional logic. So you can do a whole lot with these containers. All right, so that speaks to why we use these containers and what these containers are. Let's now talk about the different kinds of containers and why I would choose one container over another. I've grouped together tabs and accordions as well as steppers and multi-step containers. And basically, tabs and accordions are for processes that are not linear. If you want your end user to be able to hop around to any step in the process that they would like without following a linear process, I recommend using tabs or accordion. And the difference between these is not huge. It's just a matter of what you prefer in terms of the UI UX experience. Steppers and multi-step containers are for linear processes typically. You can allow your end user to move around non-linear, but ideally this container is meant for a linear process where my end user goes from 1 to 2 to 3, etc., and they complete the steps in order. Multi-step containers are like steppers in that they're meant for a linear process. The only difference here is that we're not really displaying, or the main difference here is that we're not displaying the steps for the end user. So they'll feel more like they are hopping between pages because they can't exactly see what step they're on. So for instance here, I can see my elements in the different step and I can move between my different steps, but I don't see what step I'm currently on. I've gotten a couple of examples ready here for you just to show you a built-out version of these multi-step containers. So here we have a stepper, and you can see that I can continue and move through this process. Depending on whether you want to allow this, you can allow your end user to actually click on the steps themselves and jump through a process, in this case a scholarship application, and you can have different actions running at different parts of the process as well. So everything we're seeing here is a stepper container. We also have these accordions right over here. And you can see how this functions. This is less of a process and more of maybe displaying, in this case, just different information for different health articles. And I can go to any one of these that I want in any order that I want and select the article. Now, just to focus on a specific differences between these, we'll look at some of the interactivity. And another key difference you might notice between the stepper and multi-step container versus the tab and accordion is that with a stepper, I'm just going to add here an input field. And again, ideally, you're adding a form element here, but for this small example, I'm just going to put it straight in my container here. And notice I have a mandatory field on step 1. I'm going to go ahead and preview. And if I go next on step 1, I'm going to get an error message saying this is a mandatory field, and it won't let me proceed to the next steps until I complete this field, like that. And so that validation is built into the stepper, and that exists for the stepper and the multi-step container, but not for the tab or accordion elements. Another small difference here with a stepper versus some of the other elements here is you can display your stepper vertically, and so you can create a different UI experience, and we could actually see this here if we come to registration. Here is a vertical stepper, and so again, it is part of a linear process, but you can make it look a bit different, and instead of displaying it horizontally, you can display it vertically. There are a bunch of other key differences between these elements, and a lot of different interactivity that we can focus on. And in our next video, we'll be highlighting some of the features of these different multi-step containers. And that's how it's done.